A hidden confession, a song never meant to be heard, and the truth Jungkook can no longer hide from Jimin or the world. I wrote this song about you, Jimin, every single word of it. The confession slipped out before Jungkook could stop it, and the silence that followed felt louder than the roaring crowd, still echoing through the stadium walls. Backstage lights hummed above them, pale and electric, reflecting off mirrors framed with scattered makeup brushes and half-empty water bottles. Outside the dressing room door, thousands of fans were still chanting their names, their voices a distant ocean. But inside the room, the world had narrowed to two people and one dangerous truth. Jimin didn't laugh. That was the first sign something had shifted. Usually he would grin, maybe shove Jungkook's shoulder and tease him about being dramatic again. Jimin had always been quick with warmth, quick with jokes, quick with the kind of affection that could make the entire room feel brighter. But now he just stood there. His reflection in the mirror looked strangely still, as if time itself had hesitated. "You're joking," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook wished he could say yes. The problem with secrets was that they grew heavier the longer they lived inside your chest. Jungkook had carried this one for years, through world tour, through sleepless flights, through countless nights in hotel rooms where melodies came to him like ghosts that refused to leave. Tonight had broken something. The song had changed. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit that had followed him since trainee days. "I'm not joking." Jimin's expression tightened, though he tried to hide it by turning toward the dressing table. His fingers absently traced the edge of a silver earring lying there. "You said the song was just something you wrote last month." "That's what I told everyone. And now you're telling me it's about me." Jungkook nodded. The air between them grew thick with things unsaid. For a moment the only sound was the muffled bass from the stage outside and the soft whir of the air conditioner. Jungkook could smell the faint sweetness of Jimin's cologne, mixed with sweat and stage smoke, a scent that always reminded him of late nights after concerts when adrenaline refused to fade. Jimin finally looked at him again. His eyes were searching, careful. "How long?" he asked. Jungkook knew exactly what he meant. Not how long had the song existed. How long had the feeling existed? Jungkook exhaled slowly, longer than the song. A flicker of something passed across Jimin's face, shock maybe, or recognition. Jungkook's chest tightened. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times, but the reality felt messier than any scenario his mind had rehearsed. In his imagination, Jimin would either laugh it off or gently reject him. Simple outcomes, clean endings. Reality was never that kind. Jimin leaned back against the table, arms crossed loosely. "You're serious?" "I wouldn't lie about something like that." "You've been lying about it for years." The words weren't cruel, just factual. Jungkook felt them land anyway. "I didn't know how to say it." Jimin tilted his head slightly, studying him with the kind of quiet intensity he usually reserved for choreography corrections. "You could have just said it." Jungkook laughed under his breath. "Yeah, sure, just casually confess my feelings to one of my closest friends while we're in the biggest group in the world. No pressure." Jimin's lips twitched. For a second, the familiar warmth returned. But it faded quickly. "Why now?" Jimin asked. That question had a complicated answer. Jungkook turned toward the mirror, staring at his own reflection. His stage makeup had begun to smudge around the edges, giving him a tired, almost haunted look. "Because tonight when we performed it," he said quietly, "I realized I couldn't keep pretending." The memory rushed back instantly. The stage lights blazing like miniature suns. The crowd glowing with thousands of light sticks. And Jimin standing just a few steps away during the final chorus, eyes closed as the music swelled. Jungkook had written those lyrics in the middle of a sleepless night months ago. Words about someone who felt like gravity itself, someone you orbited even when you tried to drift away. When the song reached the final line, Jungkook had looked at Jimin. Really looked. And suddenly the truth had felt too obvious to hide. Jimin noticed Jungkook watching him now in the mirror. "You're overthinking things again," he said softly. "That's literally my personality." Jimin snorted. For a moment the tension eased. Then Jimin asked the question Jungkook had been afraid of. So what do you want from me? The honesty of it made Jungkook's heartbeat spike. He didn't have a perfect answer. I don't know, he admitted. Jimin raised an eyebrow. That's reassuring. Jungkook turned around to face him fully. I'm not asking you to change anything, he said quickly. I just didn't want the song to exist without you knowing. Jimin absorbed that. His fingers tapped lightly against the table, a restless rhythm Jungkook recognized from years of rehearsals. Jimin always did that when his mind was racing. You know people will analyze every lyric, Jimin said eventually. They already do. And if they realize it's about me? Jungkook shrugged, though the thought made his stomach twist. They won't know for sure. But you will. Jungkook nodded. Jimin looked down at the floor. For someone usually so expressive, he had become incredibly hard to read. Jungkook's mind filled with 1,000 worries. Maybe he had ruined something. Maybe this confession would shift the balance of their friendship in ways neither of them could repair. Jungkook had always admired Jimin's emotional courage. Jimin felt things deeply and didn't hide it. Jungkook, on the other hand, tended to bury his emotions under work, music, and late-night gym sessions. This confession was the most reckless thing he had done in years. Do the others know? Jimin asked. No, not even Taehyung. Especially not Taehyung. That earned a small laugh. Jimin pushed himself away from the table and walked slowly toward the couch near the wall. He sat down, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as if searching for something there. Jungkook remained standing. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous. I kept thinking it would go away, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin looked up. The feeling, Jungkook continued. I thought it was just admiration or something, you know, we've been together forever. Forever is a long time. Exactly. Jimin leaned back against the couch. And it didn't go away. No. Jimin studied his face again, more gently this time. You look terrified. I am. That's new. Jungkook huffed. I confessed my feelings to you, Jimin. Of course I'm terrified. Jimin's gaze softened. You know what's funny, he said. What? I always wondered why you watch me like that sometimes. Jungkook blinked. Like what? Like you were trying to memorize something. Heat rushed to Jungkook's face. I did not. You absolutely did. Jimin smiled faintly, but there was a hint of sadness in it. I thought maybe you were just being sentimental. Maybe I was. Jimin tilted his head again. Maybe you still are. The room grew quiet. Somewhere down the hallway, a staff member laughed loudly, the sound echoing briefly before fading away. Jimin exhaled slowly. You really wrote the whole song about me? Yes. All of it. Yes. Jimin rubbed his temples. That explains a lot. Jungkook's heart skipped. Does it? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the mirror. Their reflections appeared side by side now, two figures who had spent most of their lives growing up under the same spotlight. Jimin looked at Jungkook through the reflection. You're brave, you know. Jungkook almost laughed. I feel like an idiot. Both can be true. Jimin turned around fully, facing him. For the first time since the confession, his expression looked calm. Not shocked. Not distant. Just thoughtful. You didn't ruin anything, Jimin said gently. Relief spread through Jungkook's chest, so suddenly it almost hurt. I did. No. Jimin's voice carried the quiet warmth Jungkook had always trusted. You just told the truth. Jungkook realized then how exhausted he felt. Years of unspoken emotions had finally slipped into the open. And strangely, the world hadn't collapsed. Jimin walked toward the door but paused before opening it. Next time you write a song about me, he said with a small smile, maybe warn me first. Jungkook laughed, the tension finally cracking. I'll try. Jimin nodded once, thoughtful but steady. And the moment settled between them, not broken, not perfect, but real in a way that felt impossible to ignore. The door clicked shut behind Jimin, but Jungkook's heart was still racing as if the conversation hadn't ended. The dressing room suddenly felt too quiet. He dropped onto the couch where Jimin had been sitting moments earlier and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The faint vibration of bass from the stadium stage still pulsed through the walls like a distant heartbeat. "I really did that," he muttered to himself. For years he had been careful with words, careful with glances, careful with the way his voice softened whenever Jimin laughed too brightly beside him. And now the truth was out. Not fully, not publicly, but enough to change something between them. Jungkook rubbed his face with both hands. Part of him expected panic. Instead, what he felt was something stranger. Relief. It was fragile and terrifying, but it was there. A loud knock on the door shattered the silence. "Hey, are you alive in there?" Taehyung's voice. Jungkook groaned. "Barely." The door opened before he could say anything else. Taehyung stepped inside first, followed by Hosok, both still half-dressed in stage outfits. Taehyung immediately narrowed his eyes. "You look like someone just told you the world is ending." Hosok tilted his head, or like you confessed something dramatic. Jungkook froze. Taehyung blinked. "Oh my God," he said slowly, "you confessed something dramatic." Jungkook pointed a finger at him. "You're psychic, that's terrifying." Hosok dropped into the chair across from him. "What happened?" Jungkook hesitated. Taehyung walked over and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You either tell us," he said casually, "or I'll invent a much worse version." Jungkook sighed heavily. "I told Jimin the new song is about him." Silence. Then Taehyung's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared under his hair. "You what?" Hosok slapped his hands over his mouth. "You're kidding." "I'm not." Taehyung started packing. Wait, he said quickly. "You mean metaphorically, like friendship metaphorically?" Jungkook didn't answer. Taehyung stopped packing. "Though." Hosok lowered his hands slowly. "Though." The room felt suddenly smaller. Taehyung stared at him like he had just announced he planned to set the building on fire. "You just told Jimin," Taehyung said slowly, "that you wrote a love song about him." "Yes." Directly. "Yes." Using actual words. "Yes, Taehyung." Taehyung ran both hands through his hair. "You're insane." "Thank you." Hosok leaned forward, eyes wide but not angry. "What did he say?" Jungkook exhaled. "He didn't freak out." Taehyung blinked again. "That's suspicious." "He just listened." Hosok's expression softened slightly. "That sounds like Jimin." Jungkook nodded. "He asked how long I'd felt like this." Taehyung made a choking noise. "And you answered that?" "Yes." "You absolute maniac." Jungkook threw a cushion at him. Taehyung caught it easily. "Okay, but seriously," Taehyung said, suddenly quieter. "Is he okay?" "I think so." "You think so?" "He didn't throw anything at me." "That's not a strong benchmark." Hosok rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Did he look upset?" "No." "Confused?" "Yes." "That's normal." Taehyung sighed and dropped onto the couch beside Jungkook. "You realize this could explode if anyone else figures it out." "I know. Fans already dissect every lyric you write." "I know. And if someone connects the dots." "I know, Taehyung." Taehyung studied his face carefully. Then his expression softened. "You really love him, don't you?" The bluntness of the question made Jungkook pause. The word love felt enormous. But the truth was sitting right there in his chest. "Yes," he said quietly. Taehyung looked at the floor for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Well." Hosok stood up. "Well," he said gently, That explains a lot of weird behavior over the past few years. Jungkook frowned. What weird behavior? Taehyung laughed. Oh, buddy. Hosok counted on his fingers. The way you stare at him during rehearsals. I do not stare. The way you panic whenever he gets hurt. That's normal. The way you once rewrote an entire song overnight because he said one lyric sounded sad. Jungkook looked away. Taehyung pointed at him dramatically. Guilty. Jungkook groaned. You two are unbearable. The door opened again. All three of them turned instantly. Jimin stepped inside. The room fell silent. He had changed into a simple black hoodie, hair still slightly damp from washing off stage sweat. His expression looked calm, but his eyes immediately scanned the room. He looked from Jungkook to Taehyung to Hosok. Taehyung raised both hands. Don't look at me, I just got here. Jimin sighed softly. Of course you did. Hosok cleared his throat. Well, I suddenly remembered I left something somewhere. Taehyung stood up instantly. Same. Within 3 seconds, the two of them had slipped out of the room, closing the door behind them with suspicious speed. Jungkook stared at the door. Cowards. Jimin chuckled faintly. They're not wrong to escape. Jungkook stood up slowly. The energy between them felt different now, more aware, more electric. Jimin leaned against the wall again, studying him. You told them. Only those two. They're the worst secret keepers. I know. Jimin smiled slightly. Then the smile faded. I've been thinking, he said. Jungkook's stomach tightened. That's dangerous. Jimin ignored the comment. You said the song was about gravity. Jungkook nodded. And orbit. Yes. Jimin stepped closer, his voice quieter now. You meant me. Jungkook held his gaze. Yes. The honesty hung between them like a fragile thread. Jimin crossed his arms, but it looked more like he was trying to contain his own thoughts than defend himself. You realize that kind of feeling isn't simple. I know. And it doesn't disappear just because you confessed. I know. Jimin's voice grew softer. And if people find out, it won't just affect you. I know. The tension tightened again. Jungkook took a step closer. I didn't tell you to complicate your life, he said quietly. I told you because I was tired of pretending it wasn't real. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. You're unbelievable. Why? Because you just detonated an emotional bomb, and you're standing there like it's a normal Tuesday. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck again. I'm actually panicking internally. Jimin smiled faintly. I figured. Another moment of silence passed. Then Jimin asked something unexpected. When did it start? Jungkook blinked. What? The feeling. Jungkook hesitated. His mind drifted back through years of memories. Late-night practice rooms. Shared hotel rooms. Long flights where Jimin would fall asleep against his shoulder. I think, Jungkook said slowly, it started the first time I realized your happiness mattered more to me than my own. Jimin's breath caught slightly. That's a dangerous answer. Probably. Jimin looked away, jaw tightening slightly. You make everything complicated, Jungkook. I know. And the worst part is... He paused. Jungkook waited. Jimin looked back at him, eyes sharper now. The worst part is I can't decide if I'm angry or just scared. Jungkook's heartbeat thudded loudly. Scared of what? Jimin didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer until they were only a few feet apart. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Scared that if I think about it too much, Jimin said slowly, I might realize things about myself that I'm not ready to face. Jungkook felt the words hit him like electricity. Neither of them moved. Outside the dressing room, Distant cheers from lingering fans echoed faintly through the hallway. Inside, the air between them felt charged with something fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. You might realize things about yourself that you're not ready to face. Jimin's words hung in the air like a match, hovering dangerously close to gasoline. Jungkook felt his pulse in his throat. What things? He asked quietly. Jimin exhaled slowly through his nose, then laughed under his breath, though the sound held very little humor. You really want me to say it out loud? Yes. You're relentless. You already knew that. Jimin studied his face carefully, as if trying to decide whether Jungkook could handle whatever answer might come next. The fluorescent lights above them hummed faintly. Somewhere down the hallway a door slammed, followed by distant laughter from staff members packing up after the concert. But inside the dressing room, the atmosphere felt like a sealed chamber filled with pressure. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back. You said the song was about gravity, he murmured. Jungkook nodded. And about orbiting someone. Yes. Jimin took another step closer. So tell me something honestly. Jungkook didn't move. Okay. If I told you I was confused, Jimin said quietly, would that make you regret telling me? The question landed heavier than Jungkook expected. He thought about it for a moment. No. Jimin frowned slightly. Why not? Because confusion means you're thinking about it. Jimin shook his head slowly. You're unbelievable. Still. Jimin turned away for a moment, packing slowly toward the mirror. Jungkook watched him carefully. Jimin always moved like this when his emotions were tangled, small restless steps, fingers brushing objects on the table without really noticing them. You know what the weird part is, Jimin said. What? I'm not shocked. Jungkook blinked. You're not. No. Jimin leaned against the table again. I think part of me always suspected. Jungkook felt heat rise to his face. You did not. I did. When? Jimin shrugged slightly. Little moments. Like what? Jimin glanced at him sideways. The way your voice changes when you say my name. Jungkook groaned. That's embarrassing. The way you always stand a little closer to me than necessary. That's normal. The way you get weirdly quiet when people tease us. Jungkook rubbed his face again. Okay, maybe that one is true. Jimin's lips curved into a faint smile. But suspicion is different from confirmation, he said. And now you have confirmation. Yes. Another pause stretched between them. Then Jimin asked something unexpected. Does it hurt? Jungkook looked up. What? Keeping it inside for that long? The softness in Jimin's voice caught him off guard. Jungkook swallowed. Sometimes. Jimin's gaze softened. You're an idiot. I've heard that tonight. No, Jimin said gently. I mean the kind of idiot who carries everything alone. Jungkook looked down. That's rich coming from you. Jimin laughed quietly. Fair. The tension shifted slightly, becoming less sharp but more emotionally complicated. Jimin stepped closer again. So what happens now? He asked. Jungkook hesitated. I don't know. That's not helpful. I told you earlier I'm not expecting anything. Jimin tilted his head. Not even an answer. No. Jimin stared at him like he was trying to read every thought behind his eyes. You're lying. I'm not. You absolutely are. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Okay, he admitted, maybe part of me hopes for an answer. Jimin nodded. That's more honest. But I'm not demanding one. Jimin looked relieved by that. You realize if this gets out, the internet will explode. I know. And the company will panic. I know. And fans will argue for the next 10 years. I know. Jimin stared at him for a moment, then suddenly laughed. You really picked the most chaotic possible life choice. I'm talented like that. Jimin's laughter faded gradually. Then he said something so quietly Jungkook almost missed it. I care about you too much to lie to you. Jungkook's chest tightened. Okay. Jimin looked directly at him. I don't know what I feel yet. The honesty in his voice made Jungkook's heartbeat slow slightly. That's fair. But I do know something. What? Jimin's expression became serious again. You matter to me more than almost anyone. Jungkook felt that sentence settle deep in his chest. And if your confession changes something between us, Jimin continued, I want it to be because we chose that change, not because we panicked. Jungkook nodded slowly. I agree. Jimin's eyes searched his again. You're calmer than I expected. I'm trying very hard not to pass out. Jimin laughed again, a real laugh this time. The tension eased just enough to breathe. Then the door suddenly burst open. Okay, we tried to give you privacy, but this suspense is killing. Taehyung stopped mid-sentence. Hosok froze behind him. Both of them stared at the scene. Jimin and Jungkook standing only a few feet apart, the emotional tension in the room practically visible. Taehyung blinked. Wow. Hosok whispered, did we interrupt something important? Jimin rolled his eyes immediately. You two have the worst timing in human history. Taehyung walked in slowly. So nobody crying, that's a good sign. Jungkook groaned. Please leave. No. Hosok leaned against the wall. We're emotionally invested now. Jimin sighed. You're impossible. Taehyung looked between them curiously. So what's the verdict? Jimin crossed his arms. There is no verdict. Taehyung gasped dramatically. Oh my god, it's a romantic stalemate. Jungkook grabbed another cushion and threw it at him. Taehyung dodged easily. Hosok studied Jimin's expression carefully. You're not upset, he said. Jimin shook his head. No. You're thinking. Yes. Taehyung pointed at Jungkook. And he looks like someone who just survived a hurricane. That's accurate, Jungkook muttered. Jimin glanced at him again. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Then he said quietly, almost casually. Actually, there is one thing. Taehyung leaned forward instantly. What thing? Jimin looked at Jungkook. If this song is really about me, he said slowly, then I want to hear the original version. Jungkook blinked. The original. The one before you edited it for the album. Jungkook hesitated. That version was far more personal. More raw. More obvious. Jimin noticed his hesitation. See, he said softly, you're still hiding. Jungkook looked down at the floor for a moment. Then he sighed. Fine. Taehyung clapped his hands once. Oh, this is about to be dramatic. Jungkook walked over to his bag and pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. Then he looked at Jimin again. You're sure? Jimin nodded. Yes. Jungkook pressed play. The room filled with a soft piano melody. And then Jungkook's recorded voice began to sing the version of the song that had never been meant for anyone else to hear. The piano notes drifted into the room like something fragile, almost too intimate to exist in a space filled with bright dressing room lights and scattered stage equipment. No one spoke. Jungkook's recorded voice emerged from the phone speaker, softer than the powerful tone he used on stage. This voice sounded raw, almost hesitant, like someone confessing in the dark. The lyrics were different. Much different. Not metaphor wrapped in poetry. Not carefully neutral lines meant to survive public interpretation. This version was unmistakable. It spoke about someone who danced like light breaking through clouds. Someone whose laughter felt like home. Someone whose name lingered in the singer's chest even in silence. Taehyung's mouth slowly fell open. Hosok's eyes widened. Jimin didn't move. The song continued. When you smile, the whole world tilts, and suddenly I forget how to breathe. Jungkook stared at the floor, unable to look at anyone while it played. He had recorded this version at 3 in the morning months ago, alone in a studio with the lights dimmed and the city asleep outside the window. He had never planned for anyone to hear it. Especially not Jimin. The next line arrived like a quiet explosion. "Park Jimin, you are the gravity pulling every piece of me closer." Taehyung choked. "Wait." Hosok slapped a hand over his mouth instantly. Jimin's eyes snapped toward Jungkook. The room went completely still. The song kept playing. Jungkook lunged forward and grabbed the phone, stopping the music abruptly. Silence slammed into the space like a falling wall. Taehyung whispered, stunned. "You said his actual name." Jungkook covered his face with both hands. "Yes." Hosok blinked slowly. "Oh my God." Jimin hadn't moved. His expression had changed completely now. No confusion. No teasing curiosity. Something deeper. Something almost dangerous. "You said my name," Jimin repeated quietly. Jungkook lowered his hands slowly. That version wasn't meant to leave the studio. Taehyung let out a breathless laugh. "That's not a song, Jungkook. That's a full emotional confession recorded with background music." "I'm aware." Jimin stepped forward. "Play it again." Jungkook froze. Taehyung looked like he had just been handed front-row tickets to the most dramatic show in history. "You want to hear it again?" Jungkook asked. "Yes." Jungkook hesitated. "That version is intense." Jimin's gaze didn't waver. "I noticed." Hosok quietly slid toward the door. "I feel like we might be intruding on something personal." Taehyung grabbed his sleeve. "Don't you dare leave." Jimin glanced at them. "You two should probably go." Taehyung shook his head instantly. "Absolutely not." Hosok sighed. "This is the most stressful group dynamic conversation we've ever witnessed." Jimin rubbed his temple. "You're impossible." Taehyung pointed at Jungkook. "He just released a forbidden love song confession with your name in it, and you think we're leaving?" Jimin looked back at Jungkook. "Play it again." Jungkook's fingers tightened around the phone. "Are you sure you want to hear the rest?" Jimin's voice dropped slightly. "I think I deserve to." Jungkook stared at him for a moment. Then he pressed play. The piano began again. This time everyone listened differently. Every lyric felt sharper now that the truth was obvious. "You don't see it when you laugh, but my whole world stops. You lean your head on my shoulder and pretend it means nothing. But every second I'm falling deeper into something I can't say out loud." Jimin's breathing had grown slower. His arms were still crossed, but his fingers gripped his sleeves tightly. The song moved into the bridge. Jungkook's voice in the recording sounded almost broken there. "If loving you is a secret, I'll carry it forever. Even if you never turn around." The final piano note faded. No one spoke. Taehyung looked like he had just watched a dramatic movie scene unfold in real time. Hosok was staring at Jungkook with a mixture of awe and mild panic. Jimin stood completely still. Then he asked something so quietly it barely carried across the room. "Is that really how you feel?" Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." Taehyung slowly sank onto the couch. "I need popcorn for this conversation." Hosok elbowed him sharply. "Shut up." Jimin ran a hand through his hair again, packing slowly across the room. "You were going to keep that hidden forever." Jungkook shrugged. "That was the plan." "Why?" "Because the alternative is exactly what's happening right now." Jimin stopped walking. "And what is happening right now?" Jungkook met his eyes. "Everything getting complicated." Taehyung whispered to Hosok, "He's not wrong." Hosok whispered back, "I feel like we're watching a live drama." Jimin turned toward them. Stop narrating. Sorry. Jimin faced Jungkook again. You said you'd carry it forever even if I never turned around. Yes. Jimin's voice sharpened slightly. That's not fair. Jungkook blinked. What? You wrote an entire emotional confession and decided the ending by yourself. I wasn't deciding anything. You assumed the answer. Jungkook frowned. I assumed nothing. Jimin's eyes flashed. You literally wrote, even if you never turn around. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair in frustration. That line was about protecting you. Protecting me from what? From being forced into something you didn't choose. Jimin stepped closer again. Did it ever occur to you that maybe I wanted the chance to choose? The room went silent again. Taehyung looked stunned. Hoseok's eyebrows shot up. Jungkook's heart skipped. You're saying that like there's an option, Jungkook said slowly. Jimin didn't answer immediately. His gaze held Jungkook with unsettling intensity. Then he said something that made Taehyung sit up straight. I never said there was. Jungkook felt the air leave his lungs. Jimin. Taehyung whispered loudly, oh my god. Hoseok grabbed his arm again. Don't interrupt. Jimin's voice was steady, but there was a tremor underneath it. You've been carrying these feelings alone for years. Yes. And you decided the story ends with silence. I thought it was safer. Jimin shook his head. For who? Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin stepped even closer until they were only inches apart now. Taehyung looked like he might faint from second-hand tension. Let me ask you something, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded. If the roles were reversed, if I told you I wrote that song about you. Jungkook's heart hammered violently. What would you do? I'd probably stop breathing, Jungkook admitted. Jimin smiled faintly. Exactly. The room fell quiet again. Then Jimin said something that made the entire atmosphere shift. You don't get to decide how this story ends alone. Jungkook's voice came out barely above a whisper. So what happens now? Jimin looked directly into his eyes. Now, he said slowly, we figure out what the truth actually is. The room felt smaller after Jimin said it. Now we figure out what the truth actually is. No one moved for several seconds. The air had thickened into something electric, like the charged stillness before a storm finally breaks. Taehyung leaned toward Hoseok and whispered under his breath, though not quietly enough. This is officially the most stressful night of my life. Hoseok nodded slowly. I feel like we should be taking notes. Jimin shot them a look. Or you could leave. Taehyung immediately raised his hands. Absolutely not, emotional history is happening. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck, trying to calm the nervous energy buzzing through his body. You don't have to figure anything out right now, he said. Jimin tilted his head. That sounds like you're trying to run away. I'm not running. You look like you're preparing to. Jungkook sighed. Jimin, this isn't something you need to rush into just because I said it. Jimin stepped closer again, his eyes sharp now. You think I'm rushing? No. You think I'm confused? A little. Jimin's mouth twitched. Fair. Then he said something that shifted the tension again. But confusion doesn't mean I feel nothing. Jungkook's heart stumbled. Taehyung let out a very loud whisper. I knew it. Hoseok smacked his arm. Stop reacting. Jimin ignored them and kept his eyes locked on Jungkook. You've spent years thinking about this, Jimin said quietly. I've spent about 30 minutes. That's why I'm not expecting answers. Jimin took another slow step forward until there was barely any distance left between them. You keep saying that, Jimin murmured, but your eyes tell a different story. Jungkook swallowed. What story? That you're terrified I'll say no. Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jimin's voice softened slightly. You know what the strange part is. What? I'm not scared of your feelings. Jungkook blinked. You're not. No. Then what are you scared of? Jimin hesitated. The pause lasted long enough that Taehyung and Hosok both leaned forward unconsciously. Jimin finally spoke. I'm scared of mine. The confession dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Jungkook's chest tightened. What do you mean? Jimin exhaled slowly. I mean that when you played that song, something about it felt too familiar. Taehyung's eyes widened. Hosok covered his mouth again. Jungkook's voice came out softer. Familiar how? Jimin laughed quietly, shaking his head. This is ridiculous. Tell me. Jimin ran his fingers through his hair again. You want honesty? Yes. You've always been important to me, Jimin said. Jungkook nodded slowly. That part I know. But lately something has felt different. The room went completely silent again. Taehyung looked like he might actually scream if he didn't stay quiet. Jungkook felt his pulse pounding in his ears. Different how? Jimin looked down briefly before answering. I notice you too much. Jungkook's breath caught. What does that mean? It means when you walk into a room, I automatically look. Jungkook didn't move. It means when you laugh with someone else, Jimin continued slowly, I feel this weird irritation. Taehyung's jaw dropped. Hosok whispered, this is insane. Jimin kept speaking, his voice quieter now. And when you look at me the way you did tonight on stage. He paused. Jungkook waited. My heart did something strange. Jungkook felt the words hit him like electricity. You're saying... I'm saying I don't understand what's happening in my own head right now. Jimin looked up again, meeting his gaze directly. But your song made it impossible to ignore. Jungkook stepped closer instinctively. So you're not rejecting me? Jimin laughed softly. You're jumping 10 steps ahead again. Am I wrong? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead he studied Jungkook's face, searching for something. Then he asked quietly, have you ever wondered what would happen if we crossed that line? Taehyung made a strangled noise. Hosok grabbed his arm again to silence him. Jungkook stared at Jimin. I tried not to think about it. Why? Because imagining something you can't have is dangerous. Jimin's eyes flickered slightly. You decided you can't have it. I decided I shouldn't. Jimin stepped even closer. Their shoulders were nearly touching now. And if that decision was wrong? Jungkook's heart slammed harder. You're asking a lot of hypotheticals. Jimin's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Answer the question. Jungkook hesitated. Then he said the truth. If it was wrong, then I've been lying to myself for years. Jimin held his gaze. Taehyung leaned forward so far he nearly fell off the couch. Hosok looked equally stunned. Then Jimin asked something unexpected. Do you remember that night in Tokyo 2 years ago? Jungkook blinked. What night? The hotel balcony. Jungkook's brain immediately found the memory. The quiet city lights. Cold air. Jimin sitting beside him after a long concert. You fell asleep on my shoulder, Jungkook said slowly. Jimin nodded. And you didn't move for almost an hour. You looked comfortable. Jimin smiled faintly. I wasn't actually asleep. Jungkook froze. You were. No. Then why didn't you move? Jimin's eyes softened slightly. Because you didn't either. The room went silent again. Taehyung whispered loudly. What? Hosok covered his face. Oh my god. Jungkook felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. You stayed there on purpose. Jimin shrugged lightly. Maybe. Jungkook stared at him. You're telling me you've been playing mind games with me for 2 years. Jimin laughed. I wasn't playing games. Then what were you doing? Jimin hesitated again. The hesitation said everything. Taehyung leaned toward Hosok again. This is getting dangerously romantic. Hosok nodded. I feel like we should leave, but I physically can't. Jimin finally spoke. I think part of me already knew something was there. Jungkook's voice dropped lower. And you didn't say anything. I wasn't sure. And now? Jimin's gaze held his. Now you played a song where you literally said my name. Taehyung clapped a hand over his mouth to stop himself from laughing. Jimin exhaled slowly. This isn't simple, Jungkook. I know. We have careers. I know. We have millions of people watching everything we do. I know. And if this becomes real... Jimin didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jungkook understood. The risk. The chaos. The headlines. But despite all of it, neither of them stepped away. Jimin finally asked the question that had been hovering between them all night. If I told you I need time to figure this out, would you wait? Jungkook answered without hesitation. I already have. I already have. Jungkook's answer landed in the room with a quiet weight that no one could ignore. For a moment, even Taehyung and Hosok stopped breathing loudly. Jimin didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Jungkook's face, as if trying to measure the depth of those 3 simple words. Already have. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't desperate. It was just true. Jimin exhaled slowly, and something in his shoulders softened. You're unbelievable, he murmured. Taehyung whispered from the couch, barely containing himself. That was disgustingly romantic. Hosok elbowed him again. Stop narrating the scene. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling exposed again now that the silence had stretched too long. Well, he said awkwardly, that's my answer. Jimin's lips curved faintly. You really mean that? Yes. You'd actually wait. Jungkook shrugged slightly. I've already waited years, what's a little longer? Jimin laughed under his breath, though the sound carried something emotional beneath it. You say that like it's nothing. It's not nothing. Then why does it sound so calm? Jungkook looked at the floor for a second before answering. Because I stopped expecting anything a long time ago. That sentence made Jimin's expression shift. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like you already lost. Jungkook blinked. I didn't lose. You sound like someone who gave up. Jungkook shook his head. No, I just accepted reality. Jimin stepped closer again, clearly frustrated now. You keep talking about reality like it's already decided. Isn't it? No. The firmness in Jimin's voice surprised everyone. Taehyung leaned forward again. Whoa. Jimin ignored him and kept his gaze on Jungkook. You decided the ending without even asking me, he said. I didn't want to pressure you. Not giving me the choice is also pressure. Jungkook frowned slightly. That's not what I meant. I know it's not. Jimin's voice softened again. But it still matters. The tension in the room shifted again, less explosive now but still charged. Jimin paced slowly across the floor. You said you wrote that song months ago. Yes. And you were going to release it like that. No. Jimin raised an eyebrow. So you changed it. I removed the obvious parts. Like my names. Yes. Taehyung suddenly burst out laughing. I can't believe you almost released a track where you literally sing, Park Jimin you are gravity. Hosok shook his head. That would have broken the internet in 5 minutes. Jungkook groaned. That's why I changed it. Jimin stopped packing and looked at Jungkook again. But the feeling stayed. Jungkook nodded. Yes. Jimin's gaze lingered on him longer than before. And you never once thought about telling me earlier. Jungkook laughed quietly. About 1,000 times. So why didn't you? Because you matter too much to risk losing. That answer hit harder than any dramatic confession could have. Jimin looked away for a moment, clearly affected. You're annoying, he said softly. Why? Because you make everything sound simple when it's not. Jungkook shrugged again. I'm a songwriter, that's my job. Taehyung clapped slowly. That line was smooth. Hosuk pointed at the door. Seriously, we should leave. Taehyung shook his head. No chance. Jimin sighed but didn't argue with them this time. Instead he turned back toward Jungkook. There's something you need to understand. Jungkook waited. If we cross this line, Jimin said carefully, there's no going back. I know. We won't just be friends anymore. I know. And if things go wrong, we could lose everything. Jungkook's voice was steady. I know. Jimin frowned slightly. You keep saying that like it doesn't scare you. Oh, it scares me. Then why are you so calm? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said something that made the entire room quiet again. Because losing you slowly from a distance was already the worst version of that fear. Jimin's breath caught. Taehyung whispered, stunned. He's winning every emotional argument tonight. Hosuk nodded slowly. This is brutal. Jimin rubbed his face with both hands, clearly overwhelmed now. You're not making this easy. I never intended to. Jimin laughed weakly. You just dropped the most intense love confession of the decade, and now you're standing there like it's normal. Jungkook smiled faintly. It's not normal. No kidding. Another silence settled between them. But this one felt different. Less sharp. More thoughtful. Jimin walked over to the couch and sat down heavily. Taehyung and Hosuk immediately scooted away to give him space. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Can I say something honest? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook nodded. Always. Jimin glanced up at him. Your song scared me. Jungkook's chest tightened. Why? Because it sounded like something I might write. The room froze again. Taehyung's jaw dropped so hard it looked painful. Hosuk stared at Jimin like he had just spoken another language. Jungkook didn't move. What do you mean? He asked slowly. Jimin hesitated before answering. I mean the way you described those feelings. He looked down again. It sounded familiar. Jungkook's heart pounded violently now. You're saying you feel something like that too? Jimin sighed heavily. I don't know what I feel. That's okay. But I know this. Jimin looked up again. When you sang those lyrics tonight, something in my chest felt like it cracked open. The honesty in his voice made Jungkook's throat tighten. Jimin continued. And when I heard the version with my name just now. He paused again. Taehyung leaned forward so far he nearly fell off the couch again. Jimin finished the sentence quietly. I realized I wasn't as surprised as I should have been. Jungkook stepped closer. So what does that mean? Jimin looked straight at him. It means the truth might be more complicated than either of us expected. The room felt charged again. But before Jungkook could answer, Taehyung suddenly sat up straight. Wait. Everyone looked at him. Taehyung was staring at his phone. His expression had gone pale. What? Hosuk asked. Taehyung slowly turned the screen around. You guys might want to see this. Jungkook stepped closer. Jimin stood up. On Taehyung's phone screen was a social media post already spreading across fan communities. A blurry backstage photo. Taken through a slightly open door. It showed Jungkook and Jimin standing inches apart. Looking exactly like they had just been moments earlier. And the caption underneath it read, Are they confessing something? For a moment no one spoke. The glow of Taehyung's phone lit up the dim dressing room like a small, dangerous spotlight. Jungkook stared at the screen. The photo was blurry, clearly taken through a narrow crack in the door, but it didn't need to be perfect to tell the story it was hinting at. Jimin and Jungkook standing dangerously close. Faces serious. The tension between them visible, even in a low-quality shot. And the caption, "Are they confessing something?" Underneath it, the comments were multiplying by the second. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Taehyung swallowed. This was posted 8 minutes ago. Hosok leaned over his shoulder, reading the flood of reactions. "Oh no." Jimin stepped forward slowly. "Let me see." Taehyung handed him the phone. Jimin's eyes scanned the screen quickly. More posts were already appearing. Fans analyzing body language. Zoomed screenshots. Speculation. Excited theories. Panic. Some people were laughing it off. Others were already building entire conspiracy threads. Jimin handed the phone back, his expression calm in a way that made Jungkook nervous. That escalated quickly. Taehyung ran a hand through his hair. This could spread everywhere by morning. Hosok sighed. Or by the next 10 minutes. Jungkook finally spoke. "Who took it?" Taehyung zoomed in slightly. "The angle looks like it came from the hallway." Jimin's jaw tightened. "Staff? Maybe." Hosok shook his head. "Or someone walking past." The tension in the room thickened instantly. Jungkook crossed his arms. "Well, this is exactly the chaos we were trying to avoid." Jimin glanced at him. "You're surprisingly calm." Jungkook shrugged. "I mean, we already survived the emotional explosion. This is just the public version." Taehyung stared at him. "You call this just?" Hosok pointed at the screen again. "It already has 50,000 likes." Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, maybe not just." Jimin paced slowly across the room again, clearly thinking. The others watched him carefully. He stopped near the mirror and looked at his reflection for a long moment. Then he said something quietly. "They're not wrong." Everyone looked at him. "What?" Taehyung asked. Jimin turned around slowly. "They asked if we were confessing something." The room fell silent. Jungkook's heartbeat picked up again. "Technically," Jimin continued, "they're not wrong." Taehyung looked like he might combust. "You can't say things like that right now." Hosok grabbed his arm again. "Lower your voice." Jimin sighed. "I'm just stating facts." Jungkook studied him carefully. "You're not panicking." Jimin shrugged slightly. "Should I be?" "Well, yes." Taehyung pointed wildly at the phone. "The internet thinks you two are secretly in love." Jimin glanced at Jungkook. "That's not exactly inaccurate." Taehyung made a strangled noise. Hosok covered his face. "Please stop saying dangerous sentences." Jungkook couldn't help the small laugh that escaped him. Jimin noticed. "You think this is funny?" "A little." "Why?" "Because a few hours ago the biggest problem in this room was me confessing to you." Jimin crossed his arms. "And now? Now half the internet might think we're dating." Taehyung groaned loudly. "This is not funny." Jimin looked at Jungkook again. "Does it bother you?" The question caught Jungkook off guard. "What?" "The idea of people thinking that." Jungkook hesitated. Then he answered honestly. "No." Taehyung stared at him. "You are insane." Hosok shook his head. Emotionally fearless, terrifying combination. Jimin watched Jungkook carefully. "You're really not bothered." "I mean, it's not like they know the real story." "Which is?" "That I'm the only one in love." Jimin's expression shifted instantly. "That's not what we said earlier." Jungkook met his gaze. It's the only confirmed part. Jimin frowned. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Acting like the answer is already decided. Jungkook sighed. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From pressure. Jimin walked toward him again. You really think I'm that fragile? No. Then stop deciding things for me. The tension between them rose again, sharper this time. Taehyung whispered to Hosok. This conversation is going to kill me. Hosok nodded. Same. Jimin stopped only a step away from Jungkook. His voice dropped slightly. Let me ask you something. Jungkook nodded. If the world suddenly believed we were together. He paused. What would you do? Jungkook blinked. That's a strange question. Answer it. Jungkook thought about it for a moment. Then he said quietly, I'd worry about you. Jimin frowned. That's your first concern. Yes. Not the headlines. No. Not the company. No. Not your career. Jungkook shook his head. I'd worry that you felt trapped. Jimin stared at him. Something emotional flickered across his face. You're ridiculous. Probably. Jimin's voice softened again. But that's also why I can't ignore this. Taehyung leaned forward again. What does that mean? Jimin glanced at him briefly. It means the situation is already complicated. Hosok sighed. That's the understatement of the century. Jimin turned back to Jungkook. The photo will keep spreading. Yes. People will start building theories. Yes. And the more they analyze our behavior. Jungkook finished the sentence quietly. The closer they'll get to the truth. Jimin nodded. Taehyung groaned again. This is a nightmare. Hosok looked thoughtful. Or an opportunity. Everyone turned to him. What? Taehyung asked. Hosok shrugged. I'm just saying, sometimes rumors burn out faster if you don't react. Jimin considered that. Jungkook crossed his arms again. So we just ignore it. Taehyung shook his head wildly. Fans will analyze every glance between you two for the next year. Jimin smirked faintly. They already do that. Taehyung paused. Okay, fair. Jungkook looked at Jimin again. Are you okay? Jimin hesitated before answering. Honestly. Yes. This scares me. Jungkook nodded slowly. Me too. But not because of the rumors. Jungkook waited. Jimin's voice dropped almost to a whisper. It scares me because earlier tonight you told me the truth. The room grew quiet again. And now, Jimin continued, the entire world might start asking the same question I'm still trying to answer. Jungkook's chest tightened. What question? Jimin held his gaze. Whether this feeling between us is real. No one spoke. Taehyung looked at the phone again, where the post's numbers were still climbing rapidly. The world outside the dressing room kept moving, unaware of how fragile the moment inside had become. Jimin finally said softly, I asked you earlier if you'd wait. Jungkook nodded. Yes. Jimin's eyes lingered on him. Then I need you to promise something else. What? Jimin took a slow breath. No matter what the world says tomorrow, we figure this out between us first. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I promise. For a moment no one spoke. The glow of Taehyung's phone lit up the dim dressing room like a small, dangerous spotlight. Jungkook stared at the screen. The photo was blurry, clearly taken through a narrow crack in the door, but it didn't need to be perfect to tell the story it was hinting at. Jimin and Jungkook standing dangerously close. Faces serious. The tension between them visible, even in a low-quality shot. And the caption, are they confessing something? Underneath it, the comments were multiplying by the second. Thousands, Tens of thousands. Taehyung swallowed. This was posted 8 minutes ago. Hosok leaned over his shoulder, reading the flood of reactions. Oh no. Jimin stepped forward slowly. Let me see. Taehyung handed him the phone. Jimin's eyes scanned the screen quickly. More posts were already appearing. Fans analyzing body language. Zoomed screenshots. Speculation. Excited theories. Panic. Some people were laughing it off. Others were already building entire conspiracy threads. Jimin handed the phone back, his expression calm in a way that made Jungkook nervous. That escalated quickly. Taehyung ran a hand through his hair. This could spread everywhere by morning. Hosok sighed. Or by the next 10 minutes. Jungkook finally spoke. Who took it? Taehyung zoomed in slightly. The angle looks like it came from the hallway. Jimin's jaw tightened. Staff. Maybe. Hosok shook his head. Or someone walking past. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Jungkook crossed his arms. Well, this is exactly the chaos we were trying to avoid. Jimin glanced at him. You're surprisingly calm. Jungkook shrugged. I mean, we already survived the emotional explosion. This is just the public version. Taehyung stared at him. You call this just? Hosok pointed at the screen again. It already has 50,000 likes. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, maybe not just. Jimin paced slowly across the room again, clearly thinking. The others watched him carefully. He stopped near the mirror and looked at his reflection for a long moment. Then he said something quietly. They're not wrong. Everyone looked at him. What? Taehyung asked. Jimin turned around slowly. They asked if we were confessing something. The room fell silent. Jungkook's heartbeat picked up again. Technically, Jimin continued, they're not wrong. Taehyung looked like he might combust. You can't say things like that right now. Hosok grabbed his arm again. Lower your voice. Jimin sighed. I'm just stating facts. Jungkook studied him carefully. You're not panicking. Jimin shrugged slightly. Should I be? Well, yes. Taehyung pointed wildly at the phone. The internet thinks you two are secretly in love. Jimin glanced at Jungkook. That's not exactly inaccurate. Taehyung made a strangled noise. Hosok covered his face. Please stop saying dangerous sentences. Jungkook couldn't help the small laugh that escaped him. Jimin noticed. You think this is funny? A little. Why? Because a few hours ago the biggest problem in this room was me confessing to you. Jimin crossed his arms. And now half the internet might think we're dating. Taehyung groaned loudly. This is not funny. Jimin looked at Jungkook again. Does it bother you? The question caught Jungkook off guard. What? The idea of people thinking that. Jungkook hesitated. Then he answered honestly. No. Taehyung stared at him. You are insane. Hosok shook his head. Emotionally fearless, terrifying combination. Jimin watched Jungkook carefully. You're really not bothered. I mean, it's not like they know the real story. Which is that I'm the only one in love. Jimin's expression shifted instantly. That's not what we said earlier. Jungkook met his gaze. It's the only confirmed part. Jimin frowned. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Acting like the answer is already decided. Jungkook sighed. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From pressure. Jimin walked toward him again. You really think I'm that fragile? No. Then stop deciding things for me. The tension between them rose again, sharper this time. Taehyung whispered to Hosok. This conversation is going to kill me. Hosok nodded. Same. Jimin stopped only a step away from Jungkook. His voice dropped slightly. Let me ask you something. Jungkook nodded. If the world suddenly believed we were together. He paused. What would you do? Jungkook blinked. That's a strange question. Answer it. Jungkook thought about it for a moment. Then he said quietly, I'd worry about you. Jimin frowned. That's your first concern. Yes. Not the headlines. No. Not the company. No. Not your career. Jungkook shook his head. I'd worry that you felt trapped. Jimin stared at him. Something emotional flickered across his face. You're ridiculous. Probably. Jimin's voice softened again. But that's also why I can't ignore this. Taehyung leaned forward again. What does that mean? Jimin glanced at him briefly. It means the situation is already complicated. Hosok sighed. That's the understatement of the century. Jimin turned back to Jungkook. The photo will keep spreading. Yes. People will start building theories. Yes. And the more they analyze our behavior. Jungkook finished the sentence quietly. The closer they'll get to the truth. Jimin nodded. Taehyung groaned again. This is a nightmare. Hosok looked thoughtful. Or an opportunity. Everyone turned to him. What? Taehyung asked. Hosok shrugged. I'm just saying, sometimes rumors burn out faster if you don't react. Jimin considered that. Jungkook crossed his arms again. So we just ignore it. Taehyung shook his head wildly. Fans will analyze every glance between you two for the next year. Jimin smirked faintly. They already do that. Taehyung paused. Okay, fair. Jungkook looked at Jimin again. Are you okay? Jimin hesitated before answering. Honestly. Yes. This scares me. Jungkook nodded slowly. Me too. But not because of the rumors. Jungkook waited. Jimin's voice dropped almost to a whisper. It scares me because earlier tonight you told me the truth. The room grew quiet again. And now, Jimin continued, the entire world might start asking the same question I'm still trying to answer. Jungkook's chest tightened. What question? Jimin held his gaze. Whether this feeling between us is real. No one spoke. Taehyung looked at the phone again, where the post's numbers were still climbing rapidly. The world outside the dressing room kept moving, unaware of how fragile the moment inside had become. Jimin finally said softly, I asked you earlier if you'd wait. Jungkook nodded. Yes. Jimin's eyes lingered on him. Then I need you to promise something else. What? Jimin took a slow breath. No matter what the world says tomorrow, we figure this out between us first. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I promise. The promise hung in the room long after Jungkook said it. I promise. For a moment no one breathed. Taehyung slowly leaned back against the couch like someone who had just witnessed the climax of a drama, but knew the story was far from over. Hosok was still staring at the phone screen, watching the numbers climb with frightening speed. 300,000 likes, he muttered. Jungkook glanced over. That fast? Yes. Taehyung groaned loudly. We're doomed. Jimin didn't look at the phone again. His attention remained fixed on Jungkook, his expression quieter now but somehow heavier with thought. You don't sound worried, Jimin said. Jungkook shrugged. I am. That's not convincing. I'm good at pretending. Jimin's lips curved faintly. That I believe. Hosok suddenly straightened. Oh no. Taehyung looked at him immediately. What? Hosok slowly turned the phone around again. There's another post. Jungkook stepped closer. Jimin followed. On the screen was a short video clip. Blurry again, but unmistakable. It showed Jungkook pressing play on his phone earlier in the room. The faint sound of piano notes could be heard in the background. And then the first line of the raw demo recording. When you smile, the whole world tilts. Taehyung's eyes widened. They recorded the song too. Hoseok nodded grimly. It cuts off before the line with Jimin's name, but people are already asking what song it is. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Of course they are. Jimin's jaw tightened slightly. They heard the melody. Yes. And fans will recognize your voice. Yes. Taehyung looked at Jungkook in disbelief. You're trending. Already. Number 3. Jungkook rubbed his forehead. Fantastic. Jimin looked at the screen again, then quietly handed the phone back to Taehyung. Well, we knew something like this could happen eventually. Taehyung blinked. You're way too calm about this. Jimin crossed his arms. Panic won't help. Hoseok studied him carefully. You're thinking. Yes. That's usually dangerous. Jimin sighed softly. Maybe. Jungkook watched him closely. What's going through your head? Jimin hesitated. Then he said something unexpected. If the world is already asking questions, hiding might make it worse. Taehyung's mouth fell open. You are not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. Hoseok grabbed his shoulder. Let him finish. Jimin looked back at Jungkook. I'm not saying we confirm anything. Good, Taehyung whispered. But I also don't want to pretend something doesn't exist. The room grew quiet again. Jungkook felt his heartbeat start climbing. You're saying you don't want to deny it. I'm saying I don't want to lie. Taehyung nearly fell off the couch. That's the same thing in celebrity world. Hoseok sighed. He's not wrong. Jimin rubbed his temples. This is exactly why I didn't want things to get complicated. Jungkook spoke carefully. Hey, Jimin looked at him. You don't have to make decisions because of rumors. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. You're doing it again. What? Trying to protect me. I'm trying to give you space. Jimin stepped closer. You confessed to me tonight. Yes. And now you're acting like your feelings don't matter. That's not true. Then stop treating this like it's only my problem. The tension between them sharpened again. Taehyung whispered to Hoseok. They're about to fight. Hoseok nodded. Yes, they are. Jungkook sighed. I'm not treating it like your problem. Then what are you doing? I'm trying to make sure you're not pushed into something you don't want. Jimin's eyes flashed. And what if I do want it? The words hit the room like thunder. Taehyung gasped loudly. Hoseok looked like someone had just unplugged his brain. Jungkook froze. You mean that? He asked quietly. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead he looked away, clearly frustrated with himself. I don't know what I mean yet. Taehyung whispered dramatically. I'm emotionally exhausted. Hoseok nodded. This is the longest confession in history. Jimin paced across the room again, running both hands through his hair. This is insane. Jungkook watched him carefully. Talk to me. Jimin stopped packing. I've spent years not thinking about this. I know. And tonight you suddenly tell me you've loved me for who knows how long. Jungkook didn't interrupt. And now the internet might think we're together. Yes. Jimin looked straight at him. And the worst part. Jungkook waited. I can't stop wondering what that would actually feel like. The room went silent again. Jungkook's chest tightened. What, being together? Jimin nodded slowly. Yes. Taehyung whispered loudly. This is not a drill. Hosok covered his face again. Please stop yelling. Jimin ignored them. I keep imagining what would change. Jungkook's voice softened. And Jimin hesitated. I don't know if it would ruin everything or make everything make sense. Jungkook felt something shift inside him. Jimin. But before he could say anything else, Taehyung's phone buzzed loudly. Everyone turned. Taehyung looked down. His expression slowly turned pale again. Oh no. Hosok leaned closer. What now? Taehyung swallowed. The company saw the post. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. That was fast. Taehyung looked at the message again. They're asking where we are. Jimin exhaled slowly. Of course they are. Hosok sighed. This is going to be a meeting. Taehyung nodded grimly. A big one. Jungkook looked at Jimin again. Well, looks like the outside world caught up with us. Jimin met his gaze. For a moment the tension from earlier returned, but it carried something deeper now. Something unresolved. We promised something earlier, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded. We figure this out between us first. Yes. Taehyung glanced between them nervously. You might want to figure it out quickly. Jimin's voice dropped slightly. No. Jungkook looked at him. No. Jimin shook his head. We figure it out honestly. Then he said something that made Jungkook's heart race all over again. And right now, the truth is I'm not walking away from this. And right now, the truth is I'm not walking away from this. Jimin's voice was quiet, but the certainty in it echoed through the dressing room like a sudden crack of thunder. Jungkook felt the words settle somewhere deep in his chest. Taehyung blinked rapidly. Okay, he whispered to Hosok, that sounded very serious. Hosok nodded slowly. Very. Jungkook looked at Jimin carefully. You're sure about that? Jimin didn't hesitate. Yes. Taehyung lifted both hands in disbelief. I cannot believe this conversation is still escalating. Hosok glanced at the phone again. And the company still wants us in a meeting. Jimin sighed and leaned back against the wall. Of course they do. Jungkook watched him for a moment before speaking again. You don't have to fight the entire world tonight. Jimin shook his head slightly. I'm not fighting the world. Then what are you doing? Jimin's gaze locked onto his. I'm deciding whether the truth is worth it. The room went quiet again. Taehyung rubbed his face. This is exhausting. Hosok murmured, emotionally historic though. Jungkook stepped closer to Jimin, lowering his voice. The truth doesn't have to be public to be real. Jimin studied him. That sounds like you're ready to hide again. I'm ready to protect you. Stop saying that. Jungkook frowned. Why? Because you keep acting like I'm fragile. That's not what I mean. Jimin pushed himself off the wall and stepped closer. Then what do you mean? Jungkook hesitated before answering. I mean you deserve the freedom to walk away from this if you want. Jimin's eyes narrowed. And what if I don't want to? Jungkook swallowed. Then we figure it out. Taehyung clutched a pillow dramatically. I feel like we're about to witness something life-changing. Hosok nodded. Probably. Jimin crossed his arms again, but this time it looked more defensive than thoughtful. You said something earlier, he said quietly. Jungkook tilted his head. What? You said losing me slowly from a distance was already the worst version of fear. Jungkook nodded slowly. I meant that. Jimin took another step closer. Do you realize what that means for me? Jungkook blinked. What do you mean? Jimin's voice softened slightly. It means if I walk away, I become the person who caused that fear. Jungkook shook his head immediately. That's not fair. But it's true. No. Jimin sighed. You really don't understand how much your words affect people. Jungkook laughed quietly. That's ironic coming from someone who sings emotional ballads for a living. Taehyung whispered, they're flirting again. Hosok nudged him. Not helpful. Jimin's expression shifted slightly, the tension softening into something more vulnerable. You've always been important to me, he said. I know. But tonight changed the way I see you. Jungkook's heartbeat picked up. In a bad way. Jimin shook his head. In a dangerous way. Jungkook smiled faintly. That sounds promising. Jimin rolled his eyes. You're impossible. Taehyung suddenly checked the phone again and groaned. Oh, this is bad. Everyone turned toward him. What now? Hosok asked. Taehyung turned the screen around. The trending post had exploded into multiple discussion threads. People analyzing Jungkook's unreleased song. Fans comparing the melody to older interviews where Jungkook talked about inspiration. Even slowed down clips of moments between him and Jimin on stage. Taehyung sighed dramatically. They're making compilation videos. Hosok read one of the comments out loud. Look at the way Jungkook watches Jimin here. Taehyung scrolled. This explains so much. Jungkook rubbed his face. Well, that's unfortunate. Jimin glanced at the screen briefly. Then he looked away. They'll speculate no matter what. Taehyung nodded. That's true. But speculation is different from confirmation, Hosok added. Jimin was quiet for a moment. Then he asked Jungkook something very softly. Can I ask you one more honest question? Jungkook nodded. Always. Jimin looked straight into his eyes. If I told you right now that part of me wants to try this, what would you say? The room went completely silent. Even Taehyung stopped moving. Jungkook felt his chest tighten with shock. You mean try us? Jimin didn't answer immediately. But he didn't look away either. That's what it sounds like, Taehyung whispered. Hosok smacked his shoulder again. Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper. Are you serious? Jimin exhaled slowly. I'm serious about one thing. What? I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything. Jungkook's heart pounded harder. So you do feel something? Yes. Taehyung looked like someone had just detonated fireworks inside his brain. Jimin continued carefully. But feelings and decisions aren't the same. Jungkook nodded slowly. I understand. But I can't ignore the possibility anymore. The tension in the room felt almost unbearable. Jungkook took one step closer. Jimin. Jimin held up a hand gently. Let me finish. Jungkook stopped. If we try this, Jimin said quietly, it changes everything. I know. Our friendship. I know. The group. I know. The way the world looks at us. I know. Jimin's voice softened again. And yet. He paused. Jungkook waited. I keep thinking about that night in Tokyo. Jungkook blinked. The balcony. Jimin nodded. You said I looked comfortable when I leaned on your shoulder. Yes. Jimin's eyes grew distant for a moment. I remember thinking that I didn't want that moment to end. Jungkook's breath caught. Taehyung whispered, oh my god. Hosok shook his head slowly in disbelief. Jimin looked back at Jungkook. And tonight when you played that song. He took a slow breath. I realized I might have been pretending longer than you. The room felt like it tilted. Jungkook stared at him. You mean you've thought about this before? Jimin smiled faintly, almost embarrassed. Maybe once or twice. Taehyung screamed into the pillow. I knew it. Hosok covered his mouth again to hide his laughter. Jungkook stepped closer until they were barely a foot apart. So what are you saying? Jimin looked directly at him. I'm saying the truth is, I don't want to walk away without knowing. Jungkook's heart was racing now. And knowing means. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Seeing what happens if we stop pretending. Before Jungkook could respond, the door suddenly opened. A manager stepped inside, looking tense. There you are, he said quickly. We need to talk. The room froze. The outside world had officially arrived. The manager's voice cut through the charged silence like a blade. There you are, we need to talk. No one moved for a second. Taehyung slowly lowered the pillow he had been suffocating into. Hosok straightened up from the couch. Jungkook and Jimin were still standing only a step apart. The moment between them had been fragile, almost private despite the witnesses, and now the outside world had walked directly into it. The manager looked from one face to another. His expression already told them he knew something was wrong. Why does everyone look like they just survived an explosion? He asked. Taehyung raised his hand weakly. Because we kind of did. Hosok sighed. Social media. The manager rubbed his forehead immediately. I was hoping you'd say something else. Jimin spoke calmly. You saw the post? Yes. And the video? Yes. Taehyung slowly raised the phone. It's trending globally. The manager closed his eyes briefly. That's exactly what I didn't want to hear. Jungkook crossed his arms. So what happens now? The manager looked directly at him. Right now, nothing. Taehyung blinked. Nothing. We don't react publicly. Hosok nodded. That makes sense. But I need to know what actually happened, the manager continued, before the company decides how to handle this. His eyes moved between Jungkook and Jimin. The room fell silent again. Taehyung whispered under his breath, "Here we go." Jimin stepped forward first. We were talking. The manager raised an eyebrow. About. Jimin didn't look away. The song. Jungkook watched him carefully. The manager looked confused. What song? Taehyung groaned quietly. This is where it gets complicated. Hosok nodded. Emotionally complicated. Jimin exhaled slowly. Jungkook wrote a song. The manager looked at Jungkook. That's normal. Jimin continued calmly. It's about me. The manager blinked. What? Taehyung slowly leaned back into the couch again. Here we go. Jungkook stepped forward slightly. I confessed something tonight. The manager's eyes widened. You what? Jungkook didn't hesitate. I told Jimin the song is about him. The silence that followed felt enormous. The manager stared at them like his brain was trying to reorganize reality. You're serious? Yes. Taehyung whispered, extremely serious. The manager looked at Jimin. And your reaction? Jimin hesitated. Jungkook felt his heartbeat begin to race again. Then Jimin answered honestly. I didn't reject him. Taehyung made a choking noise. Hosok leaned back and covered his face. The manager looked like someone had just thrown him into freezing water. You didn't reject him. No. Then what exactly did you do? Jimin glanced at Jungkook briefly before answering. I told him I needed time. The manager slowly processed that. So you're considering it. The tension in the room returned instantly. Jungkook stayed silent. Jimin thought for a moment. Then he nodded. Yes. Taehyung whispered loudly. This conversation will destroy our manager. Hosok muttered. Emotionally devastating. The manager paced slowly across the room, clearly trying to stay calm. You understand the situation this puts everyone in? Yes, Jimin said. You understand the headlines that could come from this? Yes. You understand the pressure? Jimin nodded again. I do. The manager looked at Jungkook. And you? Jungkook answered quietly. I understand. The manager sighed deeply. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he said something unexpected. Let me ask you both something honestly. Jimin nodded. Jungkook nodded. Is this real? The question settled into the room like a final test. Jungkook answered first. Yes. Jimin looked at him. Then he looked back at the manager. His voice was steady. I think it might be. Taehyung slowly slid down into the couch. Wow. Hosok laughed quietly in disbelief. The manager rubbed his face again. Well, that's not the worst answer I expected. Everyone blinked. Wait, Taehyung said, what? The manager sighed. I've worked with you long enough to know when something is real. He looked at Jungkook. And you don't look like someone joking. Then he looked at Jimin. And you don't look like someone trapped. Jimin nodded slightly. That's because I'm not. The manager leaned against the wall. Then here's my advice. The room went quiet again. Don't rush. Jungkook listened carefully. The world is loud right now, the manager continued, but the world doesn't get to decide your feelings. Taehyung looked surprised. That was unexpectedly wise. Hosok nodded. Very. The manager shrugged. I'm not here to control your hearts. Jimin's shoulders relaxed slightly. But, the manager added, I am here to make sure you don't destroy your lives overnight. Jungkook smiled faintly. That's fair. The manager straightened up. So here's what we'll do. Everyone listened. We say nothing publicly. Taehyung nodded immediately. Good plan. And you too, the manager continued, pointing gently at Jungkook and Jimin. Figure out what this actually means. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Jungkook met his gaze. The same quiet tension from earlier returned, but this time it felt steadier. More honest. The manager moved toward the door. We'll handle the rumors tomorrow. Before leaving, he paused and looked back. But for tonight. He gestured toward the two of them. Finish your conversation. Then he walked out. The door closed softly. Silence returned again. Taehyung looked between them with wide eyes. Well, he said slowly. Hosok nodded. History continues. Jimin looked at Jungkook. The weight of everything that had happened tonight seemed to settle between them all at once. The confession. The song. The rumors. The world watching. Jimin took a slow breath. So, Jungkook smiled faintly. So, Taehyung leaned toward Hosok. I feel like we should leave. Hosok nodded. For once I agree. The two of them quietly stood and slipped out of the room, closing the door behind them. Now it was just the two of them again. Just like the beginning of the night. Jimin looked at Jungkook with a softer expression than before. You waited years, he said quietly. Jungkook shrugged. I did. Jimin stepped closer. Maybe I made you wait too long. Jungkook shook his head. No. Why not? Because you're here now. Jimin smiled gently. For the first time that night, the tension between them didn't feel like a storm. It felt like something new beginning. I don't know where this leads yet, Jimin admitted. That's okay. But I want to find out. Jungkook's heartbeat quickened again. Together. Jimin nodded slowly. Yes. The noise of the stadium outside had faded, the hallway had grown quiet. For once, the world outside wasn't demanding anything from them. It was just two people standing in a dressing room after a long night, finally telling the truth they had both been afraid to face. Jungkook laughed softly. You realize this is going to be complicated. Jimin smiled. Most things worth discovering are. And for the first time that night, neither of them looked afraid of what came next.